Welcome back to The Book People, where I interview people whose lives and careers revolve around books. I'm your host Aishwarya, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting digital platform that has completely disrupted the traditional publishing model. So, Wattpad began as a platform where you could write and self publish your stories and read other people's stories for free. So, it's this open access, democratization of stories kind of a space. And the most interesting part is that you can actually publish your stories in sections or in chapters like on a TV show. And I actually remember writing a couple of stories on Wattpad in around 2012 2013. So today I'm talking to Devashish Sharma. He's a serial entrepreneur who became the country head of Wattpad when it officially came to India in 2018. So we talk about how we can think of stories as beyond just books or films, and he tells me exactly what people in India are reading and writing, including some really exciting and unheard of new genres like sports romance, which I had never heard of before, especially in traditional publishing, right? So if you are looking for ways to market and promote your book and you're looking for the right audience, then DM us or send us an email at connect@boundindia.com, and we can make sure that your book is heard about by people everywhere, all over India and all over the world. And our OG podcast, Books and Beyond with Bound, is finally back with its third season. So definitely check that out if you haven't done it yet. But right now, let's come back to Devashish and see what exactly is trending on Wattpad and how have its numbers doubled during the pandemic. Let's find out. Hi Devashish, welcome to the Book People.
Hey Aishwarya, thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you. And Wattpad is sort of known as this social storytelling platform, right? So what does that mean? And what are you trying to achieve with Wattpad in India?
Said a lot of people know us as the world's leading social storytelling platform, which is absolutely true. And if I have to define it, basically means that people can write any form of story on the platform and find an audience for themselves. And also readers can read any stories that they want on any topic in any genre. And while reading, they can connect with other readers, right? It's actually, the right way to describe the company would be a global entertainment company, because not only we have 1 billion plus story uploads across different genres, whether that's romance, sci-fi, horror, thriller, mystery, whatever you can imagine, right? From all over the world, being written and read on the platform by 90 million people. But also our most popular and most engaging stories are also being adapted to movies, web shows, books, and other forms of digital entertainment, right? So the whole appeal is much broader as we are able to traverse different formats.
And actually, I visited Wattpad Canada's office in 2019. They had recently started, looking for stories on Wattpad, which they were going to publish as books. Like they just opened the publishing branch of Wattpad. And I got to sort of go and talk to them and see how they were doing that. So that was really exciting to me. So how would you say that, publishing on Wattpad is different from, because it is different from traditional publishing, but it's also, a different model from just self-publishing a book as a whole, right?
Right.
So how would you say that it's different than these two forms of publishing?
Anybody can write a story on Wattpad. I would say like that is the biggest kind of benefit that they have, where they're not restricted by a gatekeeper, where they don't have to worry about figuring out who's going to read it. They write it and they know for sure that out of all the 90 million people that exist on the Wattpad platform, whether that's an app or website, they will find an audience for themselves, right? And there are almost like no restrictions in terms of languages. We support over 50 different languages. In India, we support 10 different languages. English, Hindi, Marathi are the major ones. And then we have 7 other Indian languages. So even language doesn't become a friction for them to write. Another interesting part about writing on Wattpad is that you don't have to write the whole book at once. You can publish chapter by chapter, right? So that makes it even more easier for new writers to gain confidence. And once they start getting, initial readership and that feedback from their first set of readers, it really makes it very special for them, because it not only builds confidence, but also gives them a purpose to keep writing more as somebody on the other end wants them to write more.
No, I agree because, in the very beginning, I did try to go on Wattpad as a writer. And I
Okay.
think the Wattpad format is just fascinating because it allows that immediate feedback, right? It's like you write one chapter or you write one short story and you
Yeah.
immediately get feedback from people. And it's sort of this feedback at every level kind of a format that works for
Right.
Wattpad.
Right.
And which I think is great for writers, especially writers who are trying to figure out,
Yeah.
whether how readers are receiving their stories, what is making sense, what isn't making sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. So when you look at Wattpad, do you see it as a platform that's, disrupting the publishing industry, or do you see it as something that's completely separate and removed from books and publishing?
Well, we see on larger scale, we see us disrupting both publishing and entertainment both, right? I mean, if you look at both the industries, they have been in the period of disruption. People have been trying to find ways of experiencing stories in multiple ways, right? And Wattpad, we like to believe, is leading that charge where we are not only empowering diverse voices and storytellers from all over the world and allowing them to build their own community of readers. But at the same time, we are also reinventing the wheel on how the other side of the spectrum, which is the publishers and the entertainment companies, are creating content which is fueled by data and insights, right? Um, and so, unlike traditional publishing, as I mentioned, anyone from anywhere in the world can write on Wattpad and find success. And this means that there is more opportunities for diverse voices to exist and thrive, right? So we are helping writers all over the world build an audience and get discovered, as well as make money for themselves while writing the stories they really want to write through various programs. On reader side, we help them find stories that they really want to read. But unlike other reading platforms, where reading is very solitary, where you're just reading by yourself, Wattpad basically allows you to connect with other readers who read the same story as you from all around the world, right? So that
Right.
um, it's almost like being part of a book club where you get to
Yeah.
discuss different plots, characters, with people who have similar interests and are like-minded as yourself, right?
But what about you as well? Because, I know that you're an entrepreneur and you come to Wattpad from a very sort of entrepreneurial point of view. At least that's what I think. And I'm very curious about why Wattpad. How did you get into Wattpad, and what is sort of your opinion about Wattpad and publishing?
Well, firstly, thank you. I think you're very kind,
To
but
call you an
uh,
entrepreneur.
so coming from an entrepreneurship background, like one thing that I really enjoy having is impact of my work, right? Whatever I do, how many how did I make things better for my like for the larger audience, and in this scenario it would be our users. And I think Wattpad has that immense impact on changing people's lives by not only allowing them to be creators, but also allowing them to connect with each other over things that they really want to bond with, right? Which is stories in our case. And I think this is the piece which really fascinated me, where how many writers are able to create a livelihood out of this, how many writers are able to share the voices which otherwise would not be getting a platform to be shared.
Have you always been interested in, books or stories, and what kind of books do you like to read, or what kind of content do you like to consume? Whether it's Netflix, whether it's TV shows or movies you're watching, what are you into?
Hmm. I mean, personally, I growing up in India, right? You cannot escape Bollywood. So a lot of the stories that
Yeah.
influenced me as somebody who grew up mostly in India was romance stories that were pioneered which where Shah Rukh Khan was leading the charge.
Yes.
Uh,
I
that
used to
kind of stuff.
love Shah Rukh Khan as a kid.
Yeah,
Love him.
I have to admit I also love I still love him, I would say. No matter how his choice of movies have been now lately, but
Yeah.
he's still the icon that everybody looks up to. But coming to your question, where what kind of stories? Yeah, I am more of a visual story person, where I like to watch and consume stories in a visual manner. I would say, like, I also like to read, and that is a habit or hobby I developed later on. Most of my reading comes on non-fiction content. I believe like that is where uh, like I'm still learning how to move to the fiction side of things. But since I've joined Wattpad, no surprises there. I've started reading fiction just to understand more about what makes Wattpad special. And yeah, so the stories uh, that excite me, I would say like are the ones that revolve around human relationships. But the setting could be different, right? Like it need not be a setting where a girl meets guy and something happens, but it could be a dystopian sci-fi kind of a setting where a human is saving another human, like. But I think what makes it really special is the human emotion part of it, rather than just the logic part of it, because those are the ones that really make for more compelling narratives. And if a story doesn't have a narrative, like I would not get hooked onto it.
Yeah. That's fascinating because I agree with you. I think, we always talk about stories or books in terms of genres, but I think as readers or as consumers, we always have these, I wouldn't even call them themes, right? But we always have these things that we are inclined towards, or
Right.
we love to read in any genre, which can be like the human connection, it can be the emotional connect,
Right.
it can be, like for some people it can be stories that don't have a clear ending, and it's that element of
Yeah.
um,
Vagueness. Yeah.
vagueness, exactly, that makes that story exciting.
Yeah. I
So
agree.
you said that you read stories on Wattpad, right? So what kind of stories have you read on Wattpad, and what kind of stories do you like to read? Yeah.
I think the first one that comes to mind is the story called Baking with Boys. Um, it's a really humorous teen fiction story. It has about 7 million reads on Wattpad now, written by an Indian author, which is about a girl whose mother is obsessed about get to matchmake for her. So she's in this matchmaking mode and trying to find guys, and
Yeah.
she finds herself in a situation where she comes across a few um, different male characters, and how her experience of baking with them has been. So there's like a subtle what's it called relation with the baking part, on
Mm-hmm.
how she uses food and baking as a means to figure out the right guy for herself. But I
Yeah.
think the whole narrative is pretty good, and the writer is actually somebody who's like I had a privilege of speaking to her, and I found out that she wasn't a writer. She wasn't even interested in. She never thought she would be writing, and she started writing only because she started reading on Wattpad and started believing that she can also tell stories. And this was one of the stories she started writing, and now she works as a professional writer in a TV studio in Mumbai.
Wow.
Yeah, her name is Aanchal Budhiraja, so definitely would like to mention her. The second one, like I'm along with Bollywood, I have to say, like, people are also obsessing about cricket. So when I got on Wattpad, I wanted to see what cricket related things are there. And I found a lot of sports romance. And this specific book called The Cricketer's Ex-Wife. Um,
I've never heard of sports romance as a genre. This is fascinating. Yes.
yeah, so same here, like I was just researching and what kind of content exists, and sports romance was surprisingly one of upcoming genres or trending genres in India for Wattpad. um,
Okay.
and this specific book has about 4 lakh reads. It's a romance story about relationships that between a popular cricket player and a female protagonist. And um, it almost, like, the best part about it that I liked is that even though it's written, when I read it seemed like I'm watching a TV show. So it unfolds like a TV show, one by one, and has a cliffhanger at the end of uh,
Mm-hmm.
every chapter, which makes you read more, and so on and so forth, right? So I think this was another one that comes to mind. And I guess last one would be this sci-fi story called Human Untouched. It's by another Indian author. She goes by the pen name of Sydney Carvahall, and it's a pure sci-fi dystopian world drama. um, the best part about it, as I would say, without revealing too many details, is the writing style is what makes it more captivating. So you might have read a lot of dystopian stories, but this one really gets you hooked from the first chapter itself.
That's great. I love stories which have food in them. I feel like so many of the stories on Wattpad are so similar to what gets not similar in literally in terms of the story, but in themes, in the kind of topics that they're exploring, to these traditionally published sort of books which are considered so literary and high merit.
Yeah.
And like those kind of stories are also being written by, in a sense, like really young authors as well, right?
Uh, the commonality is that these are passion points for a lot of people, where they really connect with it, and not only it reflects what they're curious about, but also talks about the depths of the imagination. Like these are just fiction worlds and fiction characters that people want to create and are so passionate about it that they want to tell the rest of the world about it. And
like cricket and romance, right? I feel like that is such an Indian thing. Nothing would be more Indian than cricket and romance. So are there any other genres like this which are coming up in Wattpad India?
Yeah, I mean, with like I have to say, like with over 1 billion story uploads now, like there is something for everyone. And in India, we see like people reading across different genres. But if I have to look at the data, I guess like romance definitely stands out, right? And specifically in romance stories, which are somewhat related to forbidden love or arranged marriages, love at first sight. This is what Indians usually like and love to read, and this is also what we see being reflected on Wattpad. But obviously, like because the writers' background, like how old they are, where they're from, it adds a very unique point of view to each and every story. So even though you might find a lot of stories in a specific topic or theme, but the narrative is always different because it is something that comes from the uniqueness of the author, right? And besides romance, we also are seeing very interesting trends on sci-fi. Especially Indian sci-fi, which I'm particularly very excited about, right?
I'm also excited about, the idea of Indian sci-fi, because I know that in traditional publishing, in that sense, there aren't a lot of, Indian sci-fi books that are out there, or speculative fiction as a whole, right? And sci-fi isn't considered a genre in India which has a lot of readership, but it clearly does. So I feel like it also reveals these trends, or it reveals what readers really want to read.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Agreed.
I'm assuming even young adult fiction, like YA fiction or teen fiction, must be big on Wattpad, right?
Yep. Young adult, teen fiction, new adult, different forms of romance. When I said romance, I meant like all of these enveloped together. And they're I mean, it's also a given because most of the audience is between 15 to 30. They love to read stories which has characters that they can relate with. And that's where, like young adult, teen fic, and new adult come into the definitely a no-brainer when you think about our audience.
And young adult fiction is great because I personally love young adult fiction, and I feel like it gets a bad rap because it's considered as something that only teenagers or young adults are supposed to read. But I, as a grown-up adult, really love young adult books because I feel like they do so much more, and they're something that are always enjoyable and always have a deeper meaning that adults can enjoy as well. So I personally love young adult fiction. What about fan fiction? Because I know that, I mean, I don't know about Wattpad India, but I know that Wattpad globally is known for, sort of the kind of fan fiction that gets published. And fan fiction, again, is not something that's considered very legitimate when it comes to publishing. Obviously, there have been a few which then became books and became sort of bestsellers, like 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fan fiction.
I was about to say that,
that's the first example of fan fiction that anyone ever has, right? Because it became so big. So what about Indian fan fiction? Are you seeing a lot of that as well?
Yes. I mean, fan fiction, obviously, Wattpad, I would say like it has a lot of original stories, but when I say original stories, I mean like stories that were created by the writers themselves. But fan fiction community itself is also a very important part of the larger Wattpad ecosystem. Um, but as you rightly said, a lot of people do not see it with the same merit. And I think that's a very closed point of view to look at things, because most of the fan fiction, if you think about it, uh, people write those fan fictions by borrowing characters, but they weave and they create their own plots, right?
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the example of 50 Shades of Grey, it's a Twilight fan fiction, but the plot is nothing like the Twilight movie, right?
Yeah.
Um, right. So that's where I think the real creativity gets fostered, if I have to say. And uh, on on Wattpad, like what I'm surprised to see is that not only we have like fan fiction for Bollywood, which is Deepika and Ranveer Singh, and for in cricket I have to say Mahendra Singh Dhoni and Virat Kohli.
Oh,
We
really?
have like Virushka, for example, Virat Kohli and Anushka,
Yeah.
Virushka fan fiction. We also have like very interesting in-depth fan fiction on Indian TV shows, which I don't know if I can name some of them, but these are popular TV shows that you see on different mainstream channels like Star Plus and Sony and others. But what people do is they either borrow the characters and they write like a completely new story in a different environment, or they try and reimagine uh, the storyline from like a different set of events, and that's what I don't know, that has been one thing that we have noticed for the Indian local fan fiction, that it's not just limited to Bollywood but and cricket, which are the main ones that we would expect them, but also to
Yeah.
television, right? um, yeah, I think Indians being having a global exposure, we also see great amount of what's it called, fan fiction being written and read both by Indian writers and readers on global themes like BTS, so Korean pop band,
Yeah.
right? And I learned quite a bit about that band by
By reading
looking at
fan fiction.
reading, or looking at fan fiction trends on Wattpad. Now I know a few names from the lead singers. I don't know if I pronounce them correctly, but they're definitely very popular, immensely popular on Wattpad. So yeah, as a whole, like category, these are certain trends we see.
Your answer made me feel really old, because when I was thinking fan fiction, the only fan fiction I have read or like read years ago was Harry Potter. And
Yeah,
now
yeah,
I just feel like that's so outdated with all the, fan fiction sort of topics or subjects that you've just mentioned.
yeah. I think stories in
But
general. Sorry, I
yeah,
just want to add, like stories in general. If you think about it, they writers, when they write about it, they always try and put the cultural aspects that inspire them into their own words, right? So when you and I were growing up, the kind of things that influenced us and the culture we were part of is very different from the culture a teenager in today's world would be part of.
yes,
And hence
definitely.
that gets reflected in the storylines and the characters that they want to write about. Like I'm sure, like you love to read and write about Harry Potter. Some people love to read and write about Lord of the Rings, but or
Mm,
Hobbit,
yeah.
right? But today's generation, I have to say, like K-pop, BTS, these are the role models that these guys look up to, and that's what they want to write and read about.
Yeah. So, as the business head, what does your role entail? What does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, I mean, my major responsibility is to grow the community in India, uh, grow our users, both readers and writers, and try and get them the best experience they can when it comes to reading and writing through our apps and websites. Um, at the same time, we also would like to develop our ecosystem in India, which is providing more opportunities to Indian writers by
Mhm.
including them in the paid stories program that we run, bringing brand partnerships to them, and also working on or actively speaking to potential studio partnerships. So these are different domains that I get to work with different other team members on my team. So it's hard to pinpoint, like how if one specific area I really go deep into, but it's more to do with at different times, what is the best way to grow our the Wattpad community. I try and focus on that.
Right. So right now the focus is very much on growing uh, Wattpad India, right? Or
Right,
growing Wattpad's presence in
right,
India as a whole.
right.
So,
Yeah.
so many other writing platforms have emerged over the years as well, like globally, but also in India. But they haven't really managed to do as well as Wattpad. So, what do you think works for Wattpad?
Hmm. I think the magic of Wattpad, if I have to say, for our readers and writers, is that direct connection that they develop from day one. There's nothing more magical for a writer from what we have understood is getting that, as you say, feedback, or getting that reaction, or getting that response um, for the stories they write, and engaging with them on certain parts of the story, certain moments of the story, and really trying to be, trying to make them a part of the whole book writing process. So I think that's something which has been our strength for both readers and writers. Um, that's, I would say, like the major thing that comes to my mind. Other than that, I think we also, because we have like more than a billion story uploads, we have like a catalog of content, a library of content which is unparalleled, and is exclusive to Wattpad. So if
Yeah.
for any new reader, when they come to Wattpad, like they can search anything, almost anything, and they'll be able to find an intriguing story that would captivate their attention, right? So they can be part of an existing community that exists on Wattpad. I think that also makes us stand out from the rest of the platforms.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like a huge digital library, right?
the Oftentimes you would find yourself in a situation where you read a specific book and you don't have anybody around you to discuss that. Whereas on Wattpad, you don't get that problem because you have like millions of people from all around the world uh, who are reading same or similar kind of books, and you can connect with them in discussions while you are reading that book, right? So that the connection is also something that hooks people in the best possible way on the platform.
So, talking about readers, in India, publishing as a whole is very centered, right? So, like all publishing houses are in Delhi, for example, and even in terms of bookstores, in terms of the reach of books or libraries is very limited to sort of the big cities, and really goes down when it comes to smaller cities. And also in terms of books, like there are so many books about, I mean, there must be probably 50 books about Mumbai at this point. There must be 20 about Delhi. But on something like Wattpad, do you see a lot of, local flavors and details coming from stories written by uh, writers from smaller towns in India?
So like 45% of our user base comes from non-metros, right? Like, so these are people who are
Yeah.
coming from nooks and corners of the country that, where, as you said, like publishers are not able to reach and not able to penetrate, right? And thanks to internet, we are able to. Um, and uh, and along with the difference in the language that they choose to write in, definitely we see like the local flavor in the kind of plots and characters they write about. uh, like say a woman in Mumbai, um, who is a working young urban professional person who is writing a story on Wattpad would write about very different themes than say a teenage girl in Jharkhand. You know,
Yeah.
because their universes, their worlds are very different, and hence the stories they want to share are very different. Similarly, on the reader side, the kind of reading topics that people choose to read on are also very different, right?
The volume of content that's being uploaded or published on Wattpad India at any given time is so much. So, do you have any sort of editing or filtering to avoid certain language or to avoid profanities or something like that? How do you do that? Or do you not have that level of filtering at all?
No, so we definitely have very strict moderation, given that we are a community platform. Um,
Yeah.
there are a few steps to it. So one is definitely we try and flag off any words or any sort of language that we know is through algorithms we can detect. Like, for example, if somebody using an F word or a curse word or some things like that, we give them warnings, and we also allow let people know that this word is not allowed. However, in the context of the story, sometimes some creative liberties have to be exercised, but we try and detect them as much as possible at the writing stage itself. Secondly, we give the right tools to our community to also moderate, right? So they can report, they can flag any kind of content which they feel is unsafe and doesn't abide by the terms of services of the platform, right? And our rule is that we will investigate, and if found guilty, we just take it down, because it's much more important for us to create a safe space for all our writers and readers, so that people have that confidence on sharing any topic that they want to write about, right? And that's why we also see sensitive topics like LGBTQ romance, stories around body positivity, stories around mental health, strong women characters, menstruation. These are different topics that we have great rich stories written about on Wattpad, and the reason is it's a judgment-free zone. People write this because they have that confidence that they will not be trolled on the platform. And a big part of that is community-driven initiatives.
What are your insights into what makes a story interesting?
So this is purely my understanding. I think personally, I think a story initially needs to have a very, very strong narrative and a topic that gets people to connect with it. Like, you have this initial set of readers who want to read about, say, strong women. And if the story is revolving around a strong women character, then you have them connected already, and then they will read, right? But while reading the story, there has to be certain triggers or events that gets them to discuss the story. Because if that is not happening, if there's no say cliffhangers, if there's no aha moments, then the whole experience is very draggy. Like, you don't really enjoy it. There would not be ups and downs of emotions, and that's what you want to weave into the storyline, right? Like, you want people to keep on guessing or being surprised in different ways or the other, right?
Yes.
And that could not just be okay, I have to put in something where people are clueless what's happening next. It could be something which really hits them on the emotions, and that emotion could be happiness, that emotion could be anger, that emotion could be what's it called, excitement, so on and so forth, right? But that conversational element is what I feel is what separates a great story from a good story. Because if it's conversational, I'll talk about it to 10 people, and then I'll convince them to read that story, and that's how the story gets more readers, right? And once once that happens, say you reach a certain amount of readership, then you have almost like a cult that one loves discussing about that story. And that's where your fandoms get created for the storyline, right? So this is just my personal view, not something that I found through work, but through my own personal reading experience.
No, I love that. That's how fandoms get created. That's how fan fiction gets written, right? Because people want to keep engaging with your story in different ways, whether talking to friends or creating stories that are based around your story.
And I mean, if you look at story as a more abstract concept, right? Like, not just as a written story, but say a movie is also a story, right? You would see that how movies or shows that has a very dedicated following, they leverage this psychology of creating conversations on social media. So you've seen the movie Welcome, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have.
Okay. The Bollywood movie Welcome.
Bollywood Welcome, yeah. Right? It's like, when it was out there, like, it was one of the okay movies, right? It's like mindless comedy and everything, but or even Hera Fairy for that matter, right? But because and a lot of people at that time probably did not choose to watch it because it was something which they didn't really like as a genre, for example. But because there has been constant memes and jokes and everything which people have started using in different situations in real life, it just for a new person who hasn't watched the movie, it just reinforces that, hey, I'm feeling left out if I don't get the context of this meme. and hence to get that context of the meme, that person then is motivated to watch the movie, and now the movie has another viewer who will create more memes and get more people, and that vicious cycle keeps going on. So
yeah, it's that feeling of FOMO, right? Because if you don't know the context, then you're getting left out of like pop culture conversations.
another example is Andhadhun, right? Like if you
Yeah.
don't watch the movie, or even Inception, like it's so open ended that everybody was discussing about it, right? And you're like, hey, I will watch the movie so that I can join that discussion. That's where I think great movies are, or cult movies are separate from average movies to some
I
extent.
was so surprised you mentioned Welcome, because I actually have friends who like repeatedly go back and watch Welcome. Like it's one of their go-to movies to keep watching again and again, and I absolutely don't understand it. So, let's talk about the pandemic.
Okay.
So obviously, there was a huge shift in, because everyone was stuck at home. There was
Yeah.
a huge shift in people going towards digital content. And did you see that as well on Wattpad? Like, I know you mentioned that there was a huge shift and there was a increase in sort of the number of users for Wattpad India, right? So what
Yeah.
kind of shift did you see during the pandemic?
People were isolated, and which meant that they were looking for new forms of connections, and
Yeah.
they also were not enjoying the reality they were in, so they were looking for forms
Yeah.
of escapisms, right? And that's where entertainment comes in very handy. And Wattpad had like this perfect mix of both, where they had billions of story uploads where people can choose whatever they want to read, and almost like act as a portal for them to be escape the reality. But at the same time, it also allows that connection with other readers uh, who are also using Wattpad as a portal to escape reality, and hence you are able
Yeah.
to talk about things that you are both interested in. I think that's where we sort of fit in really well, and and that was probably the biggest reason why we saw such huge spikes. Like if you compare to pre-COVID levels, like we saw a jump of more than 50% in April 2020
Okay.
for signups, and this is
That's
compared
a
to
lot,
early
right?
March of the same year. Yeah, and from
Wow.
January through April, the number of new stories grew by 151%. Which is incredibly high, right?
Yeah.
And like this was a very exciting time for us, working for a product that is able to bring such kind of happiness to people's lives. I think that's where Wattpad as a platform not only uh, does the usual helping writers and readers, but also that connection and bonding is what makes it worth working for.
Yeah. And did you see a lot of pandemic, like stories about the pandemic or pandemic fiction on Wattpad? Was that something that was trending?
Yes, so that was definitely something that started trending during the lockdown, and in different parts of the world, it was written in different ways. Again,
Mhm.
describing different perspectives. Yeah, so Beth Treacles, one of our very popular writer on Wattpad, She actually wrote a book called Lockdown in London Lane, which is the romance based in during the lockdown, and it did really well. I think it was it 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 started because of the topicality of the content. Like it amassed massive readership from day one itself.
What about you? How has the pandemic been for you? What have you been reading or watching or doing?
Yeah, me, besides gaining weight, yeah, I mean, for me, pandemic was very like interesting, not only because it uh, it sort of gives you that time to sort of reflect on a lot of things, and you also realize that like how uh, you do not, like, a lot of things you thought were important for you are not really that important. I guess that has been learning for a lot of us.
Yeah.
um, in specific, like I have to say, like I also use the time to reconnect with a lot of friends that I could not earlier. Also, I love that I don't have to commute.
Yeah.
I used to be in Mumbai for our office for Wattpad was there,
Mhm.
and yeah, that traffic is like I really uh, every morning I feel really happy that I don't have to go through that traffic. Even now, it's been a year since lockdown, right? I just hope that we still can work from home because I really don't want to be in that traffic. Yeah.
As someone who also lives in Mumbai, I completely understand and sympathize with your traffic woes.
So if I have to commute from my office to home, I have to be mindful that I don't schedule a meeting which ends at 5. It has to end at 4:30 so that I can leave before peak hours. And
Yeah,
then, or I have to wait till like 9 o'clock when everything is done, and then then I go.
it's like
Um,
planning your life around peak hours, right? Because you have to avoid one or
yeah,
two
around the
tasks.
traffic. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, the kind of content that has been trending before the pandemic on Wattpad and during the pandemic. So post-COVID, whenever that is, what kind of content do you expect to find a lot on Wattpad? Like, do you think there will continue to be a lot of stories about the pandemic?
What we see is that digital reading and writing is still continuing to be a popular pastime for them. It's not like the pandemic was that they adopted that only during the pandemic. I would say like the lockdown was long enough for people to develop habits, you know and they with Wattpad specifically, what happens is because of the connection part, that people are able to develop like really fast with other readers and writers.
Mm-hmm.
um, it becomes more, I would say, sticky than other reading apps, right? So uh, if you are reading a book on, say, a normal reading app that you got onto during the lockdown, there is nothing other than the story that keeps you from leaving, right? And once you finish the
Right.
story, you can leave the app. With Wattpad, if you're a reader and you start reading something, you develop friendships with other readers that brings you back to the platform even after you're done reading, right? And you want to read more. And so not only you have infinite number of, like, a billion plus story uploads, but you also have these human relationships that you develop, while discussing the books that you love. And for the writers, it's the same magic, like once they start writing on a platform like Wattpad, they also find their tribe, as we say, right? Their community. So they also find people who not only love to read their content but also believe in them as an author, and that is something that brings them back to the platform over and over again. But to the second question, where what will they be writing and reading, I think it depends completely on what part of the world they're in.
So, what are Wattpad India's plans for the next 5 years? And has the pandemic affected them in any way?
No, our plans are still to grow our user base, grow stories on the platform, get more writers, get more readers, and create livelihoods for them from the different programs we run. So nothing has changed with pandemic. If anything, it has only accelerated further. So um, we have what do we say? We have more resources, and we have a better understanding of the space now. And in terms of the 5-year plan, I think we the sky is the limit, as cliche as it may sound, but we definitely want to move in the direction of super growth, hyper growth.
Thank you so much, Devashish, for joining me here and answering all my very inquisitive questions about Wattpad and about everything that you're doing in India.
No, I'm glad. This was really exciting. My first podcast, so I hope I did well. But thanks for having me.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks. So that was Devashish Sharma talking about what exactly makes stories popular or memorable. And I love what he has to say about, the movie Welcome, and about how fan fiction and meme culture really tells us what is it that people are actually reading, listening, watching, and what is it that people find memorable. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This series is brought to you by Bound, a company that can help you tell your stories. And if you are going the traditional or self-publishing route and are looking for a way to make your book memorable, then you can reach out to us for book marketing. So DM us or send us an email at connectedboundindia.com, and we'll make sure that your book reaches the right audience. Definitely tune in to our other podcast, Books and Beyond with Bound, which is back with season 3, and we have such amazing episodes lined up for that podcast as well. And if you haven't downloaded our free research document on the Indian publishing industry, what are you waiting for? Click on the link in the description and download the document right now to know everything that you need to know about publishing in India. Thanks for tuning in to The Book People. I'm Aishwarya. And I'll be back next week with a new guest, a new question to answer. Until then, keep reading.